Welcome to Regulate This, a really unfiltered podcast.
I'm your host, Leila Shaver, and I'm here with my co-host, Tracie Baird.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. Last time we talked about having HR be our next topic, and it's poignant because speaking to our clients, we're hearing that is one of the buzzwords of what's going wrong. So I think today we're going to be able to enlighten our listeners to some things that they need to think about and even examine with their own staff. So with that, let's get right into the meat of things.
So, Tracie, I was reading an article recently that talked about how we've moved from a job hopping kind of environment to a job hugging environment, right? So, kind of post-COVID, people were jumping around different jobs, not staying in places longer. Firms had a lot of openings. They were willing to pay more and more money for talent to come through the door. But it sounds like there's been a shift, right? Where now people are not hopping around. They're not moving from job to job because the marketplace has changed. Depending on where you source the information, we're at one of the lowest levels of open positions out there since COVID, so since 2020. And we're seeing we're not seeing the salaries rise like we did in the last 5 years. They've kind of stagnated. So we're seeing people staying in their positions and not moving. But that's not always a good thing either, right? It sucks when someone job hops, but it also sucks when you have someone toxic that's not leaving on their own.
Exactly. I'm glad that you brought that up. So often it's easy to stay somewhere and be complacent. So it's almost like quiet quitting. You're not actually quitting, but you quit performing up to an optimal level and are seeing kind of what you can get by with. And it also means that those people that normally would have found their way out maybe on their own without HR having to get involved are now saying, no, I'll keep my ship, here. I'll keep my flag planted here. This is safe. This is what I'm used to. I'm willing to do this and not move on. And that isn't great for a workforce. One of the things that tends to happen when you keep people that really aren't in the right seat at your firm is, it starts to cause toxicity, not only with them, but amongst others. And it can be somewhat alarming. I saw a meme one day that talked about HR, and it talked about blight on fruit. It showed a picture of a pear tree, and it showed one pear that was diseased. It had, issues. It shouldn't be on the tree anymore, but there it dangled. The problem was everything it touched, so when another pear grew right next to it, it passed the blight onto that pear. And then another one, and pretty soon the leaves and the trunk and everything is kind of infested with the same fungus. And that's true with people too. If you're not really happy where you're at, if you're not really performing at an optimal level, if you're not really wanting to be there and you're just staying because it's normal, it's easy, it's convenient, it's a paycheck, it's a place a lot of times that starts to bleed out to other people that are in your environment, in your space. You may not even be intentionally doing as employee, although some do. But, not everybody is trying to be toxic, but there's a difference between bringing joy to what you do and having a passion and being grateful to be there and really just there to earn a paycheck. And often when you're there to just earn a paycheck, it's like, it's time to make the donuts. I'm going back in. And they're not going above and beyond. They're not looking for extra things. They're doing the kind of slump shoulders or the half smirks instead of the smile. And when they talk to other people, they bring that same energy. Clients start to realize it. They start to wonder if there's something wrong with the environment. Other employees start to, when they're grumbling, it's like misery loves company. So now I already know that employee X is unhappy. I'm feeling down today and unhappy, so instead of finding employee Y that's a ray of sunshine, I'm going to go to employee X because now we can join arms and we can both be sad together. And, that not only impacts the people that work there and the clients, it impacts the bottom line, which is a huge deal. In fact, I know I was telling you about this the other day, Leila, and we'll share it with our listeners. I had been to a seminar, and they started talking about, the difference between high performers with good attitudes and high performers with bad attitudes, and even those mid-level performers that could rise to the high performers. And they talked about a situation where there was a company that had a sales department, and the sales department basically funded the company, right? And so they had one salesperson that was a super high performer, but had the worst attitude. I can't even say bad attitude. I mean, it was like the worst attitude. And this person really thought they walked on water because they had this great sales portfolio. When they kind of came in, everybody else in the room slumped, like, oh. This person did things that were so egregious, and when I say them, it almost seems like it's not real, but it's 100% real. So this person drove a fast car, a sports car that fit in line with the ego and the attitude and all of the things that you would think of with somebody that's successful in that space. He had a parking spot that was up front because he had earned it with all of these wonderful outcomes that he had with his sales. So anyway, he decided that that wasn't close enough for him. And he didn't own the company. He wasn't an executive in the company, but he still had a spot right next to them, but still not good enough. So he took his car and drove it up and parked it next to the door on the lawn. And finally, that wasn't the step too far. But after more that he had done, and they'd brought in a consultant because they couldn't figure out why the rest of the team wasn't performing and what was wrong with them, and do we just need to get rid of the rest of the team so we could get more of this person that's performing? And the consultant said, basically, are you crazy? Like, why would you want more of this toxicity? Maybe your other people aren't performing because you have this. And so after he had done a few more things and embarrassed them and kind of ran their name through the mud in different ways in the circle that they were in, they decided to get rid of him. And he basically went out in a blaze of glory, cursing, saying all of the things like, this business is going to go down without me. And the owner was actually really worried about that because this was their high performer and everybody else was, mediocre at best. Well, guess what? The guy left and they waited. Oh God, the business, are we gonna end up having to lay people off? Or all of these things that you go through when something like that happens. And lo and behold, once he was gone, everybody else on the team was able to be their authentic self, and they stepped up and their sales actually grew. So not even just individually, but as a company, they were achieving far more than that person ever did. And the environment was so much better. They were hearing from clients. They were hearing from people in the industry. They were hearing from, employees, even former employees saying, well, had I known, I would have stayed. They didn't realize that bad attitude that they were letting permeate through their business, even though he was bringing in revenue, that bad attitude was preventing other people from actually shining and doing the same. And once they got rid of the bad attitude, the money just flowed in. And he was such a thing of the past that it was almost like Voldemort. Don't ever bring up that name again.
But I think you bring up a good point, though, in the sense that a lot of owners are afraid. They are afraid, especially of the high performer with the bad attitude. If I get rid of this person, how am I going to be able to replace their sales or their work product or how many tasks they were knocking out and getting complete? This person has been with me so long. They know all the inner workings. They know where to go for things. They have a shit attitude. They're an asshole, right? They don't follow our firm employee handbook. They disregard the policies and procedures of the firm. But I'm still afraid to replace this person. I tolerate it and allow them to continue to misbehave, essentially. And for your employees that are following the rules and they are working hard, that sucks to see. And it gets really old really fast.
Well, and it makes people really start to not like the environment, not like where they're at. And it does make them kind of go into a shell like they're a turtle and not want to come out and do their job either. In fact, I read an article today that it was an interview with Warren Buffett, and he said the best thing that you can hire for, in his opinion, is integrity. It's not making sure that people have the skill set. It goes back to, and I hate to say this, and I'm not attributing this quote to my husband, so if he's listening, I know you say this, and you've ingrained it in my head, but I know you aren't the originator, and I'm not really sure who is. But you can teach skill, you can't teach will. And my husband's a former college athlete and a coach, an athletic coach. And so, you know, he's found over time that he can teach skill set, but he can't teach somebody will. You know, I can light a candle under you once a day, but I can't carry it around all day to keep you motivated. You have to have some of that, and you have to have integrity. You have to do what you say you're going to do. You have to own what you do, even when it's not right. All of those types of things. And if you get somebody like that has very limited integrity, even if they're a high performer, it will ruin your business. And that's one of the things that Buffett said was, you know, you can hire people that have this great skill set, but if they don't have very good integrity or no integrity, your business will go bye-bye. And I think that's the thing to remember is that I'm not saying, you know, go out and every high performer needs to be, you know, taken out to the woodshed. But I am saying check people for their attitude. Make sure they're following your core values. Make sure that they are honoring the things that you want to be known for because they represent your business. Even if they don't have external components where they're meeting with clients, even if it's the internal clients, all the other people on your team, they can ruin that for you as well. And imagine if you had a whole firm of people that were complacent or stagnant or, you know, would do the bare minimum or had a really poor attitude, and so it was a fight to get anybody to do anything, let alone go above and beyond when duty called. So it's time to really take a step back and not only look at how you evaluate people you hire, but evaluate people on your own team. Some people are with you for a season and some people are with you for a reason. And sometimes the season is when I started, this was the business model I had. And these people on the seats that I hired them for were appropriate at that time. Now we're 10 times bigger, and the people that we have, hopefully we've developed them and tried to train them, but maybe they still want to be in the environment that you started in, and they don't want to be in that new environment, or maybe they don't have the skill set or the capacity and don't have the ability to grow into that environment. And it can seem like it's a really harsh thing to say, oh, but they've worked with me for this many years. Well, if there isn't somewhere else in the firm that they fit, it's not only a disservice to you and your clients and your other team members to have somebody that's not able to perform the way that you need them to, it's also a disservice to that person. You know, we had that conversation today where, you know, if you have somebody in management that can't have those difficult conversations, they can't set employees apart. Instead, they want to promote everybody at the same time so that they don't have to have a conversation with somebody that wasn't ready to be promoted. When you do that type of stuff, when you keep those type of employees, you are telling them that what they're doing is on par, what they're doing is adequate, what they're doing is exactly what you want. And if it's not, what a disservice to them when they find out that none of that is true and they didn't have an opportunity to grow, develop, or evolve. And if they leave you and they go out and use their resume to get a higher position because of what they did with you, what does that do to your reputation in the industry when they get hired and they fall on their face the first time around because none of the stuff that they did for you was real? Everybody else was picking up the slack or everybody else was helping them out. So it's a real disservice to that person as well not to give them the opportunity or think highly enough about them that you're willing to have those difficult conversations to help find out what their goals truly are and if they align with yours and if you can create a plan to get that outcome.
No, I totally agree. And I think we have both seen, both in our firm and other firms that we've worked for and with, people that we meet first, second time we talk to them and we're like, why the fuck is this person still here? Like, I have so many stories of different places I've worked where there is someone who doesn't do their job. They're just chit-chatting all freaking day long. I worked at a law firm and there was a paralegal and she every day wore jeans and t-shirts and sneakers, and our dress attire was supposed to be business casual unless we were going, in front of a legal proceeding, and then, business formal. She actually went to one of the partners and said, I didn't say please and thank you enough when I asked her to do certain tasks. And I'm like, you're the paralegal. You're there to support me. I do see please and thank you. I mean, it got to the point where I literally was printing out emails to prove to the partner that I wasn't being disrespectful or condescending or rude. And it was an hour-long meeting I had to have with her and the partner. What a fucking waste of time. And I'm someone who puts in the hours. I hustle, I grind. You call me on the weekend, you need something, I'm there, I'm getting it done. So to be then subjected to that kind of conversation and be like, really? Really? You're gonna bring me in here and waste my time to talk with this paralegal who nobody can get along with because she's so difficult, over me not saying please and thank you enough. And who do you think lasted at that firm? Who do you think was the first to leave? I was. And she stayed.
Right. And so you're right. And so now who else is subjected to that type of behavior? And they lost somebody that went on to open her own firm and run circles around the prior firm. So think of what you could have done for that firm had you actually had a decent conversation and they stepped back and really looked at what was going on. Some of the people that you think might be your best, and I've heard that over and over again, when I come in and do like ops, or when I've come into firms and done evaluations, these are my best people. And then I start evaluating and I'm like, actually, they're your least efficient. They're the people that are not doing things timely. They're the people that are passing the buck to somebody else to get help, and then they're acting like it's their own work. So, that examination is so important for both you and them.
No, it is. And, I think part of the problem is, especially with firms that are growing, it's easy to like hodgepodge positions together and be like, hey, you were doing this, why don't we throw this on you and throw this on you? And then before you know it, this person there's cracks that start to show up because they've got so much going on. Or the responsibilities thrown at them, it's not stuff they're good at. I mean, one thing I know I learned the hard way is just because someone's really good at getting the task done doesn't mean that they're the appropriate person to manage the people getting the task done. I know that's a mistake I've made multiple times, and I know other business owners have too. You have someone that's really good at their job, but that doesn't mean they're good at managing people doing that job. So, when we think about promotion within a business, we always think it has to be up a ladder, right? You have to be promoted up into these management and supervisorial and kind of executive level positions, but not everyone's ready for that. Not everyone has that skill set.
You are absolutely correct. And sometimes people don't want to grow into management as well. Sometimes it's becoming a subject matter expert where you are and growing in that position. I feel like this is story time with Tracie Bear, but one of the things that clicked with me when you were talking was the story of the pack mule. We've all probably seen the burros that you can get that will take you up to the Grand Canyon and on those pesky trails up that mountain that are really hard to traverse, and most of us, would decide, oh, this looks too steep. But the pack mule, can carry sometimes us, or it can carry our belongings. And oftentimes, I'm not saying that our employees are the pack mule, but I am saying when you Swiss Army knife somebody and try to make them the jack of all trades and the master of none, this is what happens. The same thing as the pack mule. So the story of the pack mule is there's this pack mule that was just amazing. This burro would traverse the Grand Canyon. It would take up all of the things that people needed and made it a much more pleasurable experience. And so one day, the owner of this pack mule said, "Oh my gosh, yeah, they take all my stuff. Why don't you go ahead and throw your stuff on too?" And it worked. The pack mule could take it all up. Well, then the next time it's like, "Oh, it can take mine, yours, and yours." And so they loaded it up, and the pack mule went a little slower, but it still went up. The next day it's like, "Okay, it can take mine, yours, yours, and yours." Well, this day, literally the ass hit the sand, right? Pack mule's tush went down, and they're like, "What's wrong with this thing?" And they're pulling at its ropes, and it's trying to get it to move, and come on, what's wrong with you? Hitting it on the rear end. Let's go. And then they're like, "It's lame. There's something wrong with this. Why is it not moving? Maybe it's sick." No, what had happened was there was nothing wrong with the mule. What was wrong was the owner. They kept packing it so full that eventually it couldn't handle any load, and it became incompetent and just sat down. And so the owner looked at it like it was a problem with the mule instead of, what have I packed onto this mule? And I think we tend to do that with star performers. We'll put all of our time into the laggards because we got to build them up, and then we let the stars kind of languish. And then we start to look and say, like, well, we can't pack any more onto the person that's kind of the laggard, so let's give more to that star performer, but let's not shower them with attention, praise, development, because they're good, they're great. We'll just keep throwing stuff at them. So, it's really that thought that oftentimes people get stuck with the bottom 10% that are the laggards, while all the people that are the A and even the B employees that could become A, they move out.
I think that's very true, because you and I have both lived those scenarios in other jobs and even here at the law firm. But I think what our listeners should really think about too is when you're looking at your current staff, what are you tolerating? And then what do you really know? We see this a lot with clients where it's like there's no job description, there's no key performance indicators. How often have we said, "Oh, this is a great employee"? We hear that from a client, and then we get to working with that employee and ask, "Well, how's this going? What do you do here?" And it's like, you don't know your asshole from the hole in the ground.
That's exactly it. I mean, before you even hire somebody, you should be reviewing what is it that we're trying to achieve with this position? How does this position impact our overall goals? And as we said on the last podcast, that's another issue, because sometimes people don't even plan for the year or think about what their goals are or what they're trying to achieve, and they hope it just happens for them. And it's kind of like weight loss. If we all just wished it away, we'd be thin. It doesn't work. So, you have to think about, what are we trying to achieve as a company? What do we think this role will do to impact what we're trying to achieve and help us achieve that? What are the things we need them to do or be successful at in order to achieve our goal? And then work backwards. Okay, this is what we need. So what are the things that we would assign that would allow that role to be successful? What are the things that we need? What are the soft skills? What are the hard skills? What are the cultural things that we need? And that's one of the things that you also have to be really careful. Again, I'm not saying that if you're trying to hire a heart surgeon that you're like, well, I'll hire the mechanic. They're good with tools. Obviously, skill does matter in some circumstances, but if you're only hiring for skill and you're not ensuring that they align with your team, with your culture, there's going to be a rub. So it's making sure that they have those attributes as well. In fact, in that article I mentioned about Buffett, he talked about, ask them about how they handle those fun HR questions. No, not the HR question, what tree would you be? Those are ridiculous. but it's more so the HR questions of, tell me about a time when, how did you handle that? If this were to happen, like if there's stuff in your firm that you want to make sure gets handled in a certain way or doesn't get handled in a certain way, ask those types of questions. Find out how they think, how they process, what are the ways in which, what are their go-tos, how do they learn, how do they resolve conflict, can they have difficult conversations, or do they become an ostrich and put their head in the sand and everything around them just keeps going? Do they shut down if they aren't doing well? There are questions that you can ask to seek guidance on those things to kind of get a better idea of who you're hiring. And then make sure you're using the probationary period after you hire them, when you've trained them and done all of that, to check their work, to ensure that it's actually happening, to ensure that those things are really there and it wasn't just a soundbite because they studied some questions before they entered your interview. Make sure you're checking references. Make sure that you have KPIs and that you're actually looking at the KPI versus what they're actually doing. Make sure that if they, once they are in, if you think that there's still value there when the relationship is not going exactly as planned, do a development plan, put them on a performance improvement plan, monitor that plan, make sure that they are part of that plan. It's not your plan, it's their plan. If they can't live by their plan, they're never going to live by your plan. So those are some of the things, but even in that hiring, once you've kind of created that scorecard where you're saying, okay, this is what I need, this is what this role is trying to accomplish, this is the objective, this is what we need for outcomes in order to achieve our overall goals, and here are the attributes that we need, and even, here are the skills and all of that. Analyze the candidates, and then make sure that you have a job description so that when they start, it isn't the wild, wild west, choose your own adventure. If that's the case, let them start their own company and they can do whatever the hell they want over there. But get a job description. Make sure it includes KPIs, key performance indicators. Here's the things that you need to do to ensure you're successful in this role. And they should be things that are actually achievable and attainable and specific. All of those things need to be there. There are things that they need to do to be successful in the role to knock it out of the park. What are those things? Make sure you're doing reviews. Make sure you're honest in those reviews. Make sure you're getting feedback from other people. During their training, make sure you're giving them assignments during that initial period to see their work. Follow up with people that are training them. Follow up with people that they're talking to. Look at their work product. Provide feedback. Do go, no-go decisions each day, each week, especially during that probationary period. Remember, during that period, it's still courtship. Just because you've hired him, it isn't a marriage yet. You're trying to still decide, is this still the one for me? And they're trying to decide, is this still the one for me? So as much as you're selling your company to them, they still need to be selling themselves to you. If they get in and it's like Jekyll and Hyde, hello, red flag.
You're absolutely right, but it also sounds like when you are hiring, you need to make sure you've got a bunch of documents in place, right? So we've talked about job description, we've talked about key performance indicators, we've talked about a scorecard you need, which identifies kind of all of their responsibilities and how successful they are in accomplishing, or what is their level of expertise when it comes to those individual tasks or responsibilities. And then using that scorecard and updating it periodically, whether it's monthly or quarterly or some other time frame, so that you have a record of things that they're showing improvement on and becoming experts at versus areas that may need extra training or supervision. But I think also, there are a lot of clients, I always joke about this, but who tell me that they have gentlemen's agreements. And I always joke, well, a ladies' agreement is written. And I can count on a ladies' agreement to protect me, right? So you need to make sure you have contracts in place. You want to have an offer letter that clearly stipulates the requirements of the position, the requirements to be successful. You want it to explicitly state that there's a 30, 60, 90, however long probationary period, in which employment is not guaranteed and you guys are feeling each other out. And then you've got to be consistent from employee to employee to employee. And that is something that I think a lot of firms have issues with because they hire family, they hire friends. And, I'm going to treat this person this way and not treat this person this way. And from a legal perspective, when we're talking about Department of Labor, the state or federal, when we're talking about equal treatment under certain anti-discrimination laws, you've got to be consistent in your treatment of your employees, and that's easier to do when you have consistent policies and procedures, the expectations are documented. All of that is necessary to set you and your firm up for success.
Exactly. And you made a valid point, and I think this can be even kind of our last thing we talk about here. But when you're talking about all of those things that we want to do to be successful and making sure that we're, digging in a little deeper and having the discussions about 30, 60, 90 days, you wouldn't believe the number of organizations, businesses, firms, you name it, that have wanted to terminate somebody on the 91st day because they didn't do, and now they're a bona fide employee. They didn't do anything during the probationary period to figure out what was going on with this employee. They didn't spot check work. They didn't check in with other people, with supervisors. They just assumed smooth sailing until it wasn't. And now here we are. And a handshake doesn't suffice in court. And depending on what jurisdiction you are in, the courts may be, or the laws may be, more aligned with the employee than the employer. So it's important to also make sure you have your ducks in a row from that standpoint. This is your time to determine, do we have the right people? And it's their time to determine, did I sign on with the right employer? Because if not, they could leave as well. So again, this is your courtship period. Use it, utilize it, do the right things, because if not, you can get stuck with a lemon and then you have a hard time terminating. And document. That's the most important thing. Make sure when you are meeting, when you are looking at things, that you're acknowledging the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, and that you're having those conversations, because that's another thing that you hear about if somebody ever leaves or gets terminated or they seek action or even unemployment. Well, did you have the discussion? Did you provide it in writing? Did you provide the training? Did you let them know where they were failing? Did you give them an opportunity to amend? Is it written in your handbook? Did they sign the handbook? How do you know they read it if they didn't acknowledge it? So do your due diligence. Do the right things. You're not playing business. You are a business.
You're right. And I think that's why we always hear, I don't know who it's attributed to, but this whole concept of hire slow and fire fast, right? When it's become clear this person is not going to make it, that they don't meet your standards, not critically thinking, they're not getting tasks done on time, they're creating drama, they're overcomplicating, they're making excuses. It's time to show them the door. Don't wait to get rid of that person. And I've gotten criticism for that before, because it's like, well, you have turnover. And it's like, well, I'm looking at all the people that have left my firm. There's not a single one that I was like, that was a mistake. I would be willing to rehire them. And in fact, everyone that we've hired since to replace has been a better quality person, has done better service for the client, has contributed more positively to the business.
Exactly. You don't set them and forget them. You make sure that you're doing the right things by them and they're doing the right things by you and by your clients. And if they're not, then it's a disservice to keep them. I know I've had to fire people many times over my 30 plus years, but I'll tell you, the first one was really bad, and I never look forward to it. It's not like I'm like, I get to terminate somebody. Nobody likes that. If you do, you're probably a psycho. But Nobody likes to do that, but it's good for them as well. They deserve to be in a place where they can shine, where their zone of genius is amplified, where, the spotlight can be on them and they can excel. And that clearly isn't where they are, because otherwise you wouldn't be having the conversation. And you also deserve to have somebody, as does your team, as do your clients, to have somebody in that seat that can shine, that wants to be there, that wants to go above and beyond, that wants to do the job, that wants to grow and excel and be there. And if those are not the same person, then set them, if you love them, set them free. And don't hire family. Quit hiring your damn family and friends. And quit saying that the people that aren't your family, that are on your team, are part of the family. They aren't. Families are dysfunctional. Why do you want to create dysfunction in your firms? Value yourself, value your team, value your clients, value your company that you built, and value that person enough to allow them to go somewhere where they can excel, because where they are is not that place. If they're stagnant, if you don't grow, you die. So with that said, we think we've given some good nuggets for you. And this is something to take. Do your due diligence, do your research. Always reach out to us if, have this desire to talk more about these things, or this is a pain point for you. Look at us for legal, compliance, all of the different things within your business at www.myrialawyer.com, and check us out anywhere you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, so on and so forth. We're there.
Listen, if you were looking for a sign from the universe that you needed to fire someone, take this as your sign. And just know it may be hard in the short term, but it's going to be worth it for you and your peace of mind into the future. So, with that, thank you for listening, everyone.
And document, 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 document.